In this demonstration, I'm going to take this puck of centered clay that I'm throwing left-handed or clockwise on my Shimpo Whisper wheel, and I'm going to open the center, and I'm going to pull up the walls into a cylinder. Because I'm throwing left-handed, the majority of my work is happening in the 6 to 9 o'clock region of my wheel head. And I'm definitely not working in the 12 to 3 because that's the danger zone. The 9 to noon and the 3 to 6 are kind of gray areas. I can work in there a little bit if I need to, but I really try not to go past maybe 5 to 10. So to open this clay, let's just revisit our posture, because if we are centered in our approach to the clay, it's easier to keep the clay centered and keep it where we want it to go while it's turning on the wheel. The gravitational force of the wheel right now wants to push the clay out. My force on the clay is pushing it in and up in the directions that I want it to go. It wants to fly off the wheel. Think about the fair ride, the Gravitron, the one where that spins around and you get pushed back against your seat and then you kind of fly up. That's what your clay wants to do. So when we touch the clay, our body is centered. We are pulled all the way up to the wheel. There's not a gap between our lap and the wheel head, because the more connection we have with the centered area of the wheel, the stronger our core is going to be. So we're thrown around by this little 1 pound lump of clay a lot less. So this is where my legs are, and this is going to keep my seat stable. My arms, when I touch the clay, are going to be tucked into my sides as much as possible, either down into my hips or up near my ribs, but somewhere in the core section of my body, my elbows and my upper arms are going to be pushed in and connected to strengthen my center. When my hands touch the clay, I'm going to use slow, considered movements. I'm not going to dive in really quickly, and I'm not going to pull off really quickly, because that's going to want to throw that clay off balance, and then I'm going to have to recenter it. Or if I've already started pulling up the walls and I throw it off balance, I could cause the pot to collapse or have to start over, which isn't the end of the world, but sometimes it's kind of a pain in the butt, especially if you're getting really close to being finished. You always want to move really slowly when you're approaching or leaving your clay. You want to make sure that your clay is lubricated. There's a little bit of a sheen on it at all times. Anywhere that there's not a sheen, you probably want to try to ensure that you get some slip built up, because that is going to be a spot that's more likely to drag or be sticky. But you also don't want your clay to be so sloppy that things are flying off, because the clay is going to absorb the water, and that's going to weaken the body of the vessel that you're throwing the more water you have sitting around inside the vessel or on top of it. So to start with opening your centered lump of clay, we're going to see, how do I want to do this? Okay, the position I like to start is with a 2-fingered opening. I'm going to anchor my hand. It's just resting really lightly, not enough to cause a lot of pressure or deform the shape of my centered clay, but enough to stabilize my fingers. I'm going to cross my fingers to give a little bit of strength and resistance to my middle finger or my index finger, whichever one you find more comfortable. You want to have a little bit extra water when you're opening, because you're pushing into the clay. And then you're just going to rest your finger right in the center of your puck, and you're just going to start pushing down. And as soon as you start to feel a little bit of resistance, usually by the time you get to the first knuckle joint, go ahead and put a couple drops of water in there, and then you're going to go down again. And you're just pushing straight down But you're not going to go all the way down until you touch the wheel head, because then you're not going to have a base for your vessel. So if you're trying to make a donut, then you probably do want to go all the way down to the wheel head. But for our intents and purposes today, we want to leave enough clay down there. So we've got about 1/4 of an inch, which is about as thin as I like to go. That's actually a little bit thinner than I normally go, because I like to have a really thick foot ring on the cups and bowls that I throw. But at this point, it's not too late to fix that. I can go straight down. Right now, my walls are angled in a little bit like a cone. So if I go straight down into this cone, I'm going to hit the wall before I hit the bottom, and I can push that clay down into the center and give myself a thicker base to open out from. The trick is that you don't want to accidentally force a big air pocket into that. So we're going to switch to an overhead view for the remainder of this demonstration. When we're forming our vessel, what we really want to pay attention to is the shape of the inside of the vessel, because the outside can be modified through trimming with a lot more ease than the inside. Once you're done throwing your vessel, generally the inside should be finished unless it needs just a little bit of refining here or there, or a little bit of smoothing out. But for the most part, you want to throw the inside to the finished shape and form that you're looking for. So we've opened it up. We've got a lot of slip on the shape. And we want to open this up now. How we're going to do that is, first, we're back into our triangle of safety. We don't really need the wheel head going at maximum speed at this point. That's not going to help us with opening and staying in control of what's happening in this. So when we say opening, we're stretching this space open by pushing the clay out, and it's going to want to bulge out on the side, which is okay. If you keep a little bit of control over it, you can get that bulge to kind of rise up a little bit, so you'll end up with a little bit of an opened volcano shape. And whenever your hands are touching your clay, they're going to stay touching each other to stay solid. And all we really want to do is just push a little slowly from the inside. So it's not a squeezing and it's not a pulling up. It's a pushing in, and I'm feeling what the clay is doing while I'm pushing in, and I'm letting the clay move. And because my fingers here are supported by the wheel head and the bat and the outside wall of the clay can't bulge out this way. It's going to go up. I'm going to get everything wet again, because every time you move a large amount of clay like this, it's going to get dry and sticky again. So no matter what I'm doing, whenever I'm touching this clay, my hands are going to support them as much as possible. My fingers are each other's cheerleaders. They're going to make sure that everybody stays strong. And this is also going to help protect against finger strain and wrist strain. Because you're not fighting the clay. And if it feels like you're fighting the clay, then you probably have an air bubble somewhere. So right now my clay is really unhappy with me. And it really does feel like there's an air bubble in here. Somehow I managed to lose it. The last thing we're going to do before we take our vessel off go ahead and remove a little bit of the clay down at the bottom. What I like to do is squeeze a little water in there. And I'm going to put my finger in. At the same time, I'm scraping from the outside. And then because I'm extra, I like to put a fancy little foot ring on my cup. I really do it because I have a lot of runny glazes, and it's nice to create some texture right down at the bottom to help keep that glaze from sliding around too much onto my kiln shelf. It really helps to have a very wet very wet clay when you're modifying a foot ring. There we go. Get our bat wet. Pull our wire through the water and the base of the vessel. And then with dry hands, we can take it off. And